So thank you very much for coming to this session on the role of theology in the Jesuit University. You'll see on page 34 the paper, but also the task force, and we're representing that task force and thanks to the help of Michael Garanzini. So the idea was to draw from as many different places as possible the sense of theology. And one of the things that runs through the paper that you may already have detected was we have formation centers in theology, those that are preparing people for priesthood, but we also have theologies inserted and located theology departments within universities. And those are completely different environments, academic environments, and so that will also be reflected. What we've decided to do is to try and create as much space as possible so that we can all debate this. So quite short inputs from our panel. And on the panel, you've got Susan Wood and you've got Peter Folan, along with me and some others who were part of the drafting committee in the end for putting all our thoughts together. Then we have Father Luke from Sogang University in Korea, and Father Jorge from the Javeriana in Colombia, and Joseph Abfulo from Arupe University, They're presidents to respond to the different aspects of the paper, and so it's so that we can actually set up that sort of conversation. But let me just begin with a letter from St. Ignatius. So this is St. Ignatius in 1532. He was asked to give some advice by his brother on the future of his nephew. And Ignatius says, "My opinion, unless you happen to have a better idea, is that there would be no harm in directing your son to the study of theology rather than canon law. The former..." Thank you. Ignatius was very wise right from the very beginning. But the best bit comes next. "The former is a subject that is more likely and better disposed to enrich him with a wealth that will last forever, and to ensure for you more peace in your old age. And I am convinced that to advance in that subject, you will find no better place in the whole of Christendom, so well equipped as the University of Paris." He didn't know Oxford at the time. For his maintenance, tuition, and other academic needs, I think that 50 ducats a year will be enough, provided they are well administered. Same problems of finance right from the very beginning. So, Ignatius already identifies, rather than choosing a career path in canon law, that for the deepest human need and formation, theology is central, and that's Ignatius coming from his own experience. So theology is significant, but obviously, although the significance of theology, one could argue, has not changed over these centuries, the role it plays both in our culture and in our institutions has quite considerably. So the question we were trying to address in this paper is, okay, what is the role of theology? It's certainly an identity carrier, I would argue, in every Jesuit university, but how does it carry that identity? And what does it bring to the other disciplines and other discourses? And so the paper is there for discussion. It's not a final draft. It's not an ideological statement. It's there. It has its limitations. It's there for us all to discuss this. And I'm very conscious that as well, theology suffers, like most humanities at the moment, from the whole question of finance, staffing, and its role. It's also, in many places, theology has also, for various reasons, been coupled with religious studies. And so what's the identity of Catholic theology, and indeed ecumenical theology, with a strong Christian commitment within that broader horizon? So many of you will already be in touch with this. Also, we have to admit, I think, that theology itself, Catholic theology itself, is also in transition at the moment. And so theology is facing a lot of key questions for itself, as well as the questions it wants to raise within our universities. So we're going to move to a short discussion then. I'm going to ask Peter, for those of you who may not yet be familiar with the paper, it's from on page 34 and forward. So I'm going to ask Peter to introduce the paper, just a brief outline so that everybody has it. And I should also say Joe Muller is also here, and he's in the congregation, and I hope Joe will also contribute. Joe is a very significant contributor on the task force. Peter.
Thank you, James, and good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Folan. I'm a Jesuit, and I'm an assistant professor of theology and religious study at Georgetown. And as you heard, I'm going to try to offer a little bit of an executive summary of what our paper is. I thought I would do that by asking and hopefully answering three questions. First, what do we think that we're saying in this paper? Second, what are maybe some tensions that we had as we were establishing this paper, maybe even getting a look under the hood of the paper? And third, what do we hope that you'll do with it? So first, as James said, the paper runs from pages 34 to 45 of the handout, and you'll see that it's really organized in 6 parts. The first is to establish a context and to recognize the diversity of contexts in which our institutions of higher learning find themselves. Next, it's to talk about the identity and the mission of a Jesuit university, what that is in particular. Third, since it's talking about theology, we thought it would be helpful to talk about the state of play in Catholic theology today, both as it finds itself after the Second Vatican Council, and then in particular, how that manifests itself at a Jesuit university. Fourth, we look to the goal of any university as being to respond to the signs of the times. We discuss that in general, but then we look at 5 particular challenges that we identified as being especially urgent. Ecology, peace and security, the crisis of political discourse, anthropology in the age of new technologies, and then religious pluralism. Fifth, we talk about how this vocation, and we like that term, that the university is to espouse, that the Jesuit university is to espouse, is ecclesial in nature. And finally, we conclude by speaking about the role of synodality, both as it's manifesting itself in the church today, but also how the university, the Jesuit university in particular, is situated with certain mechanisms to make that an especially helpful form of governance and way of proceeding. So a little bit about what we think we're saying in the paper. Maybe to get under the hood a little bit and even think of some tensions that we might have had as we were developing the paper. One of them, I mentioned before that the document runs from page 34 to 45, so that's 12 pages. 4.5 of them are spent on the responding to the signs of the times and the 5 challenges. We thought this was important, but we also were struggling with wanting to say that it can't just be simple that the role of theology is to contribute to ethical conversations. It certainly is that, but it can't be limited to that. In fact, in some ways, the reason why we saw it having a place in an ethical conversation is because of even prior commitments that the theological project makes. And I found inspiring what Father General said yesterday in his talk, at least as I have it here in English. If you're looking at it, it's in part B. It's near the bottom of that page where part B starts. But he wrote this, or said this: "It is urgent, therefore, to discern what type of person we imagine as the fruit of the university experience that we propose. This is the central matter of our discernment. The human person needs to find meaning in his or her life and actions, the great actions and the small ones of every day. We propose to seek and to find the style of research, social action, and university education that is able to initiate and accompany personal and social processes that give meaning to life in all its dimensions, moving toward life in its fullness." That idea of a full life, of what makes a person. We see theology not contributing just to ethical questions, but to these basic anthropological questions as well, these foundational questions. And so, lest it be looked at differently, we wanted to make that part clear. A second important moment for us, the bulk of this paper got written during a time that a number of us spent together in Rome, and we had the great privilege while we were there to spend an hour with Sister Natalie Beckhart, one of the undersecretaries for the Synod of Bishops. Some of you know Sister Natalie. It was fantastic, and we had been thinking about synodality initially, even before we met with her, but that time together really crystallized that for us, and that's the note we wanted to end our paper on, because we were inspired by it and wanted to see it very much in connection with Pope Francis's vision of the church. We also know, this is also kind of under the hood, that in terms of looking at the diversity of context, we're also talking about many of the institutions represented here do not have theology or religious studies departments as academic units within their institutions. And so we tried to think through, what is that going to look like at such institutions of higher learning as well? So a little bit about what's under the hood. And then last, what we hope will be done with the document. As James said, this is a starting point. We even left some typos in the document just to show that we know it's a work in progress. So you're welcome. Well, we hope it's a point of conversation for you within your institutions, for us here together, maybe even in the sessions tomorrow morning. We avail ourselves for conversation as well for that, but that it would be a starting point. So I suppose that's the goal and the note that I'll end on, that hopefully this summary and this document as a whole is a beginning to something bigger.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Peter. Luke, would you like just to... yes, if you wish, certainly.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Luke Sim, President of Sogang University in South Korea. It is an honor for me to be with you here in this assembly, especially be seated as a panel in this session on the role of theology in today's Jesuit University. Deep gratitude to be given to the authors of the paper for very deep and thoughtful reflections on the role of theology in facing various challenges, the qualities of Jesuit education, and our identity in ecclesial context. It helps me to ponder deeply on my mission as president of a Jesuit university. In this reflection, I would like to share the struggle we have at Sogang University in regard to maintain or strengthen our Catholic and Jesuit character among faculties, staff, and students. Over 60 years history from the very beginning in 1961 toward 1990s, at least it seems to me Sogang was doing very good at expressing Catholic and Jesuit character in wider Korean society. But from 2000 on, we have faced many difficult situations concerning expansion project for a second campus, lack of Jesuit presence, financial shortage, etc. Sogang has been striving as a Jesuit university to achieve its academic, moral, and human excellencies. Sogang has several well-known faculties such as economics, media communications, and electronic engineering, and biochemical engineering, to name a few well-known department institutes. Our general humanities education program is well known and benchmarked by other universities in Korea. Our mission as a Catholic university is to form and educate leaders who are equipped with Christian worldview and values, who eventually contribute in building better human society through his or her expertise. We as educators are dedicated to form our students to be men and women for and with others. In this regard, generally, Catholic universities offer semi-required courses for forming Christian view on human person, that is, theological anthropology, Christian ethics, and also offer various extracurricula focused on community service-oriented activities. There are also various devotional small societal meetings organized by Catholic students, such as Christian Life Community, Bible Study Group, etc. I believe there are also many different as well to promote communitarian spirit among students and alumni, even for staff members and faculties. But nowadays, there are some resistance among faculty as well as student body against this systemized required theological education. Thus, we developed a new paradigm for freshmen, a compulsory 2 days overnight retreat-like a program called Growth and Reflection, with which we aim to develop for students personal and social skill to reflect on experiences of various social realities from the Christian perspective. This is done through experience, reflection, action, evaluation cycle, which we adapted from the Ignatian pedagogy of the spiritual exercises. We hope, at least as a Jesuit university, or alumni eventually acquire skills or qualities we name as 4 Cs: sound Catholic conscience, human and academic competence, compassionate heart toward poor and marginalized, will commitment to practice the ideal in his or her life situation. I hope every graduate of our Jesuit universities be trustworthy, be amiable to work with, and be competent and compassionate in his or her expertise. The presented paper noted that the university leadership is critically important to envision the Jesuit educational vision be implemented in the actual situation. I would express it slightly different way, that the presence of Jesuits and our friends is very critical in our educational mission be effective. As you might know well, that as an East Asian country, Korea, Christian population is less than 20%, Catholics less than 12%. Thus, this ratio should be applied equally to Sogang students, alumni, staff, and faculty members. Most Sogangers are not Christian. There are also only 15 Jesuits working as professors among 350, 5 staff members out of 180. That's all. Therefore, it is more difficult not only to get number of Jesuits be involved in important academic policy-making structure, but also to increase collaborators who deeply understand and support the Catholic educational philosophy of the Jesuit. In reality, the core curricula of general education, such as theological anthropology and Christian ethics, are more often entrusted to a Protestant rather than a Catholic lecturer. And there are only 2 or 3 Jesuit priests working in the campus ministry, but since they are not regular faculty members, it is very difficult for them, they say, to work with sufficient authority, competence, and responsibility. The proper academic and curricular system is well in place, and the school regulations are well established, but when it comes to implementation, real difficulties overwhelmed the situation. For theology education, we cannot just put all the burden to the Graduate School of Theology as responsible for all of this. This is because as an independent graduate school, there are many immediate tasks being taken care of within the theology faculty itself. When it comes to hiring new Jesuit professors or hiring part-time instructors, there is little liquidity in school administration due to government regulations. Currently, we are working with Sogang Corporation to expand opportunities for the new faculty members and staff to have introduction to our Jesuit educational tradition and philosophy through overnight retreat gatherings, lectures, brochures, etc. This source reflective response is my share with you this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luke, for setting a context in which, both real and cultural, in which theology has to come alive. Susan, would you like to say?
Yes, I'm Susan Wood from Regis College in Toronto. I come here with the experience of that Jesuit theologate, but also my prior 14 years at Marquette University in Milwaukee. So I've experienced both the university and the theologate. My role here today is to show you that we're aware that this document does not exist in a bubble, but that there are challenges. I'm going to preempt your challenge to us by giving you what I think some of the challenges are to this document. And there are 3 points. The first is that the culture of our schools vary widely, and the impact of theology is going to differ according to that. The second is that we need to attend to the manner in which theology is delivered in these schools and to whom. And the third point is the need to rethink the delivery of theology. Okay, first, briefly, the culture of our schools. Even my experience is North American. This is why we have the response from people from other continents, and that even within the North American context, the culture of the school will vary to how popular theology is. For example, at Marquette, it was we only had probably 20-some majors in theology at any one time. If you look at Boston College, Notre Dame, it's much more, because when 60% of your students or 50% of your students are non-Catholic, that impacts the delivery of theology. And so you have to look at those demographics. Also, in terms of the culture of the school, you have the impact of the culture wars of religion in a particular place. So sometimes students have a conversion experience and they're very suspicious of their teachers of theology, if they're not delivering the brand of Catholicism that they are expecting. So that's another challenge. In terms of how theology is delivered, in many places it's delivered through the core curriculum of the school. And we're seeing that schools on a regular basis, about every 10 years, revise their core curriculum. And in those revisions, the humanities are eroding, as is the role of theology. So one of the wars of the core curriculum is to have the number of required theology courses diminish. In terms of departments, many of us are finding that it is ethically unsound to advocate for majors in theology unless it's a double major due to the economic impact and the availability of jobs. So the fact that theology does not stand alone as a major. And then the importance for outreach beyond the university and to look for other populations to study. Students, there's the other issue that we're fond of saying in universities, that theology is not catechesis, and yet students come to us without catechesis. So how do you do theology without catechesis and yet say it's not catechesis? So that is a challenge. People working who are graduates of Catholic institutions frequently find themselves needing to represent Catholic identity when they themselves have only had 1 or 2 courses in theology. So there's a huge challenge for theological education to reach people who are going to continue the tradition, as we've just heard, the lack of Jesuits Jesuit universities, we have to have educated lay people in theology. I think this points to the need to look for adult populations and adult delivery of theology beyond the traditional 18 to 22-year-old age group. In terms of the need to rethink the delivery of theology, what we're finding is that I think we need a pre-theology program before they're ready to enter into theology itself, and that students are attracted on a need-to-know basis. Therefore, they need an experience that awakens a desire to learn for theology, which could be an interior experience, a conversion experience that they want to examine. Then that sometimes leads to praxis. We find that introducing them to people who lead lives of meaning that are theologically informed are often an impetus for study, such as Dorothy Day or Oscar Romero. And that once they have this interior experience, this experience of practice, this encounter with witness, then they might be ready to study theology. So the question is, how can we give them those prior experiences that prepare for the desire and ability to study? And then finally, I think faculty need to be retooled to teach in a different way. We tend to teach as we were taught. Those of us of a certain generation studied theology in a certain way. Younger faculty sometimes do this better. But so there is a generational difference in the faculty. But to retool the faculty, not just to teach as they were taught, but to make connections between theology in terms of interdisciplinarity, in terms of personal experience, in terms of the arts. But we face an uphill battle because of the position of, we say, a Jesuit education is a liberal education, and yet, and theology finds its place in that, but that too, it has its challenges today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Susan, for those very meaty and important questions. Jorge, would you like to respond or share with us your experience?
Bien, muy buenos días para todos. Jorge Peláez, rector de la Pontificia Universidad Javeriana Colombia. Gracias, Mike, por la invitación a participar en este panel. El documento que he leído con mucha atención sobre el rol de la teología en la Universidad Jesuita de hoy es un estímulo para hacernos preguntas muy de fondo. Primer punto que quiero compartir con ustedes, el tema de la identidad. Cuando en Colombia se habla de la Universidad Javeriana como una universidad pontificia que pertenece a la Compañía de Jesús, ¿cuáles son los rasgos que nos identifican en la opinión pública? Y esto aparece en los surveys hechos a empresarios, a egresados, etc. Primer rasgo, somos reconocidos por nuestra calidad académica y humana, y esto se refleja en los rankings. Los rankings no son un fin en sí mismo, sino que son una consecuencia, un resultado de políticas de formación de profesores, políticas de investigación, etc. Si un rector busca como finalidad subir en los rankings, está equivocado en su agenda de gobierno. En segundo lugar, somos reconocidos por nuestro compromiso con la paz y la reconciliación. El rector de la seccional Cali ayer hizo una presentación muy clara de la opción que ha tenido la universidad en estos procesos. ¿Cómo está incidiendo la Universidad Javeriana Colombia, Bogotá y Cali en los procesos de paz y reconciliación? Algunos ejemplos, además de los cursos, programas de máster, etcétera. Influjo en políticas públicas. En el Congreso de la República hemos colaborado con otros actores políticos para reformas sustanciales en la legislación colombiana. Ante las altas cortes hemos participado a través de nuestra Escuela de Derecho también para que se haga justicia y se devuelva las tierras a los campesinos que han sido desplazados por los violentos. Y también el acompañamiento a las comunidades víctimas de la violencia. Entonces, segundo rasgo, reconocidos por nuestro compromiso por la paz y la reconciliación, algo que tiene que ver con la esencia del Evangelio. En tercer lugar, somos reconocidos por la formación ética y en justicia social. La opinión pública percibe un ethos, un espíritu, una sensibilidad especial en nuestros médicos. Nuestros economistas no son simplemente esclavos de los grandes indicadores y de la macroeconomía, sino que tienen en sus análisis una visión en que, según el Papa Francisco, todo está conectado con todo. Otro elemento de nuestra identidad, somos reconocidos por nuestro compromiso con los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Dentro de las universidades del país, en un ranking de Times Higher Education para Colombia, somos la número 1 entre las públicas y las privadas como universidad comprometidas con los ODS, y ahí entra a fondo el tema del Laudato Si, que se ha convertido en un elemento sumamente importante de nuestra agenda desde el año 2015. Por esto, la Congregación para la Educación Católica, en la promoción del Pacto Educativo Global, del cual poco se ha hablado en esta reunión, pero es un reto gigantesco para todas las universidades. Nosotros lideramos, junto con la Universidad Católica de Australia, el eje de desarrollo de ecología integral y tecnología desde una perspectiva ética. Y otro elemento fundamental de nuestra identidad, como somos percibidos por la sociedad, es la innovación educativa. Las universidades públicas y privadas siguen con mucho interés las políticas y decisiones que hemos tomado respecto a flexibilidad curricular, certificaciones, programas construidos de manera interdisciplinaria entre varias facultades y varios departamentos, etc. Entonces, estos son algunos de nuestros elementos diferenciadores, identificadores, donde la marca evangélica, la marca jesuítica funciona muy bien. Respecto a la teología, tenemos una facultad de teología que tiene 85 años de antigüedad, los está cumpliendo este año, y tiene 2 unidades académicas. La primera es el Departamento de Teología. El Departamento de Teología, pues como su nombre lo sugiere, está destinado a la investigación y formación de profesionales de la teología, sacerdotes, religiosos, catequistas, etcétera. Los títulos que ofrece son reconocidos por el gobierno nacional, según los procesos de acreditación, y en segundo lugar también son títulos eclesiásticos reconocidos por la Santa Sede en sus 3 ciclos, el bachillerato, la licencia y el doctorado. No voy a hablar de eso porque lo que interesa acá es fundamentalmente qué hacemos con nuestros jóvenes. En Bogotá tenemos 17.000 estudiantes de pregrado, undergraduate. En Cali tenemos 7.000. Todos los estudiantes de pregrado de la Universidad Javeriana deben hacer obligatoriamente 4 créditos en formación teológica, 2 cursos, y 4 créditos en formación humanístico-ética, 2 cursos, obligatorios para todos. Y para eso ofrecemos un amplio menú de alternativas, de tal manera que el testigo de Jehová no se siente incómodo, de talmente que el judío pueda también tener su crecimiento espiritual, pero es una oferta. Ofrezco algunos cursos y con esto termino esta primera parte de mi intervención. Por ejemplo, la Escuela de Artes ofrece como formación teológica un curso Arte y Espiritualidad, construido entre la Facultad de Teología y los artistas, los profesores de la facultad. Un curso sobre vida y horizontes creativos. Otro curso, Teología y Música. Bueno, pongo estos 3 ejemplos. La Escuela de Ciencias ofrece para sus estudiantes los siguientes cursos, también construidos colaborativamente: Sentido de Vida y Salud. Otro curso, Teología del Cuidado de la Vida y de la Salud. Otro curso, Ciencia, Fe Cristiana y Moral. Estos son algunos de los cursos ya más especializados que las escuelas ofrecen para sus estudiantes. Y además, la universidad ofrece un menú muy amplio de libre escogencia para todos los estudiantes de pregrado. Doy algunos títulos: Ecología y Religiones. Otro que suena un poco pintoresco: El Diablo, The Devil, en las religiones. El ser humano en el cosmos. Religiones y ecumenismo. Fundamentos teológicos del judaísmo. Introducción al budismo. Teología islámica. Seguimiento de Jesús, etc. Entonces se ofrece un amplio menú de oportunidades para estos procesos de formación. Hasta aquí quería aportar en este primer momento de la conversación. Gracias.
Thank you, Jorge, for giving us that very vivid sense of the university's role in the culture and theology's role in the university. Thank you very much. I'm now going to just do a quick presentation, and I deliberately want to be a little bit provocative because I think the paper is a very good paper. I think it's very well written, but I don't think it's radical enough. And so I want to just suggest some areas where I think, I'm speaking now as a theologian, not just as the Secretary for Faith. First of all, theology is not negotiable for the Society of Jesus because the very work of theology is already in our name, the Society of Jesus. And once we claim that name, we are committed to an ongoing reflection about Jesus, who Jesus is, and the meaning of Jesus for the whole of humanity and the whole of creation. We can't separate ourselves from that work, and that's a theological work. So that's where I would start from. We mentioned at the beginning of the paper that theology has a certain context, and it's a context of identity, secularization, privatization, and marginalization. Just to focus a little bit on two aspects of that, there is a real danger of marginalization. Marginalization of theology within the church itself, so that theology ceases to function well and to serve the church because it gets hijacked by other agendas. And secondly, obviously, particularly within the West, theology becomes a private enterprise and is seen not to be of any relevance or an embarrassment because it's a challenge. And we're still struggling to find the right language with which to engage our secular cultures. And the secular cultures are not just out there, they're also in us, because we all participate in these cultures and are all shaped by them. I would go back to Irenaeus in the 3rd century, who says that Jesus is a novum, a completely new event, a new reality. And I would start from there because Jesus continues to be a novum for us. We can't master it, we're challenged by Christ, and that's an important reality with which we live, and it's a creative reality. To borrow an expression from Michel Foucault, Jesus is a source of generativity. And our universities and theology itself needs to pick up on that challenge rather than get into familiar discourses and familiar arguments. And as Kevin and I were speaking the other day, Kevin gave me a great line, the dance of the signifier, which manifests postmodernity. Postmodernity has no future, and it has no future for theology. So we don't need to play these sort of games. We need, in fact, to engage our culture from a new position. Therefore, theology is always subversive, and if you find theology difficult to fit into the institution or to talk with other colleagues and others, that's good. It should be. And that's also a challenge to theology itself, because theology itself should be engaged in that sort of creative conversation. Peter mentioned synodality. I'm on several commissions for the Synod in the Vatican, and what really strikes me is at the moment, we lack a real theology for synodality. And so the future of the church that we want will depend on the sort of theology we create for it. And that must be a reflective theology that comes out of the experience of synodality itself, but it also has to be deeply prayed and discerned. And that's a whole new challenge to theology in the way in which we've been doing it. And I think Pope Francis is well aware of it. Father General, in the first part of his talk, mentioned discernment. I would hold that there is no discernment unless it's a theological act. Discernment is about finding God. It's not about the nice protocols that we use to make good decisions. Those are very useful. But it's not discernment. And also, discernment is an eschatological act. Because every time, no matter how small our decision, no matter which way we go in our universities or in our lives, every time we seek God's will and choose God's will, the kingdom comes. That's a demonstration in history, in our situations, of the kingdom, that it has arrived, and the sovereignty of God in our lives and in our institutions. So discernment itself is a theological act which is profoundly challenging and requires conversion, and that's the sort of work that we're engaged in. And all the things that are mentioned in our paper, I wondered if theology was not making too big a claim to talk about the political discourses, to talk about ecology and all the rest of it, until I came here. And every single presentation, and I've learned so much from them all, always touches on something profound and deep about where God is moving, about the need for a spirituality. Ultimately, it's talking about an anthropology, and it must be a Christian anthropology. And that's also the work that we're all engaged in. And because of that broad commitment to mission, theology is naturally interdisciplinary, not to claim that it has all the answers, but to be a genuine creative and questioning participant in the discourses of humanity that all take place in our universities. So that's the role I would want for theology. As I say, if you want to be Jesuit and you want to use the name of Jesus, you can't avoid theology.
Now, these people have said everything. What do I say? First, just to thank the authors of this text. I think it covers so many issues and is challenging that we should move in a certain direction. We are talking about Jesuit universities. And in the tradition of formation of the society, it is encouraged that when a person comes to the end of his formation, this person should have at least a licentiate in philosophy or theology. I think it is not for nothing. It is that when this person is in a context, this person should manifest clarity of thought to a level that they can help other people think clearly. In the Jesuit University, therefore, our mission is to help our students think clearly and to be able to identify what is happening around them. They must be people who question things, why they are or why they are not, or why they are the way they are. So that dimension of questioning helps our students to be more well-rooted. Basically, when we have our people, when we are in the Jesuit university, or when we find a Jesuit university in context, or when a Jesuit university is offering theology, how do people understand what we are doing? One question, when I was studying theology, our professor always emphasized relevant and contextualized theology. Put in a simple way, not by the same professor, but by another one, these persons could say that when you are doing theology, one, do theology on your knees. 2, do theology with the Bible on one side and the newspaper on another side, on another hand, so that what you are doing speaks to your context. I think this is the cultural context that we are talking about. And so when we have our students go through theological studies, or when we expose them to elements of theology, then they should be able to assess what is going on around them. They identify matters of justice. They identify matters of faith. They identify matters that require dialogue. But it's not dialogue for wasting time. It's dialogue from a strong foundation that they know what they are talking about, and they try to listen to the other person. So that dimension of listening is critical. Father Adolfo Nicolas one time said that, as Jesuits, we should be enthusiastic about giving spiritual exercises. We should give spiritual exercise to non-Christians. More so, we should give spiritual exercises to the atheists. It demands that when we give it to the atheists, it means that we give spiritual exercises without mentioning Christ and without mentioning God. Yet these people should come out with more of a similar experience, like somebody who is well-founded in his or her faith. But you cannot do that unless you are well-rooted in your own faith, and so well-rooted in your theological studies or your theological knowledge. The paper kind of presents elements. We have theological education. We have theology. And we have religious education or religious studies. I think all these, when professional theologians look at them, they are disciplines that have different depths. When the person does theological studies and the person does theology, these are two different disciplines. And our students, this is my thought, when they do the selected courses that Dr. Wood talked about, these people are given methodology so that they can use them as tools in life contexts, that they can respond to situations that emerge. Finally, I think we can succumb to the nice, the good things without being controversial. And I think that is not what doing theology in a Jesuit institution is. It requires that we identify what people have said. We identify what people have talked about, but we are able to go beyond the horizon to identify new things. Basically, it invites us to searching. And when we get into searching process, you find that we continue searching, and it is something that just goes on and on and on, and we do not have definite answers. I think this is what we are being asked to do when we do Jesuit theology. When we do theology in a Jesuit institution. Lastly, as we talked about context. When I was studying theology in Berkeley, I was lucky to be in the academic board. And one of the fathers asked, what do people understand that we are doing here? And they tried to guess, and nobody had a concrete answer. So one of the fathers who was very familiar with the University of California in Berkeley, he was asked to go and talk to these people, to the students, to the lecturers, to hear what they are talking about, how they understand us. When we had the next academic board, so this fellow was to give a report. So what do they say that we do? You remember that text of the gospel? who do people say I am? And you, who do you say I am? So this fellow came back with this report. And when he came back with the report, he said, no, I listened to them. And they say, what you are doing here is a waste of time. If people can see that we are really wasting time, then we are not doing enough. So we have to do more. We have to pull up our socks. And if we don't have socks, we better buy new ones. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Joseph. Although we started a little bit late, I think we're still aiming to finish at 12:15, but that gives us about 16 minutes just to open the floor and present the questions and engage in some sort of debate. So the floor is now open. Please, are the mics on? Can we hear? Yeah, I think we'll take a couple of questions and then we'll open it up. Thank you. So, please.
Yeah, my name is Gonzalo Villagrán. I'm Dean of Theology in Granada, in Loyola Andalucía University. And I just wanted to point out that I think the task force might be a bit biased in the sense that from Europe there is only someone from the Gregorian. I think the Gregorian has a different role. It cannot be assimilated to an European faculty of theology. And I feel I'm missing here the voice of theology in Europe, which has its own difficulties, challenges, the diminishment of people. I really would ask that for the future that is somehow compensated and is more inclusive. So you have the voice of the poor from Europe. Thank you.
So hi, appreciate everybody's comments. Daniel Joyce from St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. In our reality, our undergraduates, we require all of them take an introduction to Roman Catholic theology. Then we also require all undergraduates to take a course on the intersection of faith and reason in any other field. It could be science, it could be social sciences. Then thirdly, we require them to take a course in a non-Christian religion. And our goal there is to force Catholic theology into conversation with other religions and in the faith-reason debate in other fields. In your task force work, did you find that putting Catholic theology and requiring it dialogue, or hopefully dialogue, with these other nexuses, either whether it's other faith, study of religion, or other fields, did you find that was helpful and it allowed Catholic theology to have a more valued place? Did that come up, especially in those Jesuit schools where Roman Catholic theology has been required? That's my question.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Nick?
Nick Austin from Campion Hall in Oxford. Thank you very much for the paper. I'll certainly be using it or the next iteration with my institution, and not just with theologians as well. I think with other professors who are interested in engaging in theology. My question concerns, is there a section that's missing in the document to do with tradition? The document accents reading the signs of the times, contextualization, historical consciousness, dialogue with other disciplines. But if it's not rooted in a study of the theological tradition from Scripture, Augustine, Ephraim, Aquinas, Suarez, Rana, Metz, if it's not rooted in all of this rich tradition, then what will it actually have to bring to this dialogue with other disciplines? So I just want to clarify, I'm not advocating traditionalism, but I am saying that in order for theology to bring its own specific contribution to the academy, it needs a continual work of recovering anew the tradition of the church.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you.
Hello, Mark Bosco from Georgetown. And really, I love the document. I love the conversation. A couple just thoughts that ring in my head is, first of all, certainly religious illiteracy and how to engage students, how to engage our faculty. But how do we offer then in theology a different paradigm? I was taken that there was not the word spiritual exercises really doesn't come up in your document. And it seems to me that that is where we can actually engage that entranceway into student life. And so maybe a conversation about a more closer collaboration with mission and with campus ministry, the language of transcendent meaning and the hungers of our students, retreat experiences, immersion experiences, how this impacts it. And I think even more fundamental questions like, how do I belong? How is community? How does this theological tradition create a community? And so I would just like us to continue to think about whether it's the community of a university, a community of a region, a nation, a community of the church. So those are some thoughts.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kevin Burke from Regis University in Denver, Colorado, and also a mission officer like Mark, and I'm picking up on his comment about the intersection between theology and spirituality, making use of the spiritual resources, understanding the way that spirituality actually is a foundation for theology. That would be my first thought. But the second is that the audience here would not simply be our students, although that's crucial, but we need to talk to our own colleagues, and we need to talk to our trustees, and we need to talk to the larger audience that is a part of the university conversation, including donors. And we need to be able to be theologically informed in the way that we present our work as a university. And I think it's something that's really what I find potentially dangerously lacking in our universities is enough theological literacy among really smart professors in a number of different fields, among really smart academics who are top administrators in the university and really are not at all theologically informed. And I don't think a Jesuit university can be a Jesuit university without theology. One of the points that your paper and your panel made, for which I'm deeply grateful. But I would want to underscore the importance of developing theological conversations within the university. That is to say, does God have a place? And this was going to be my final point. It isn't just ethics, and it isn't just anthropology. I really appreciate the previous comment about the tradition, but I would even go deeper than that. It's about our own encounter with God and finding a language for that.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Pep Maria. I am a Jesuit. I have a PhD in economics, and I teach in a business school, which is very secularized and which gathers students from 90 countries and therefore from different religions. And we have had at the beginning of July a meeting in my business school in Barcelona with professors from different Jesuit universities around the world. Professors, some of them teaching theology, some of them teaching in other disciplines. And we are striving about, in a project that is called Jesuit Higher Education and Religious Diversity, which includes, when we think of religious diversity, we include also secular approaches or non-religious approaches to God and to the issue of God. And I wanted to highlight that this afternoon, one of the breakout sessions, Secularism, Religious Pluralism, and the Jesuit University, will be devoted to debate about these issues and to explain also the results of the workshop that we had at the beginning of July with some people who are around, and among them Peter Fuller. Right. So it's kind of advertisement, but since we don't have a task force representing us, I have had to take profit of this moment.
That's great. Thank you.
So thank you.
I'm sure it will be packed out. Please.
Hello, I'm Elias Opongo from Hekima University College. I'm not really a theologian. My background is peace studies, international relations, social sciences, And I like the fact that in the paper you talk about interdisciplinarity. I had a theology professor who, whenever you questioned anything, any concept in theology, will ask you, why are you here if you don't believe? And why do you want to become a priest if you're questioning? I think theology needs to question, need to have an interdisciplinarity with social sciences. And I don't know how much of that, I've seen more and more is becoming acceptable. I come from a continent where theology was very violent against culture, violent against identity, and violent against traditional religions. And so the process of sanitizing theology in modern days or in our continent, in Africa, I think will involve also talking to the people to understand what is the understanding of the kind of theology that our seminarians or our Jesuit scholastics or those who come to our theology program are able to transfer to believers, to Christian communities. So just to know at what level are we in terms of social science research and theological doctrines that we teach in our classes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I'm conscious that we're at 10 minutes past 12. My intuition would be to say, these are great questions. If we had another 2 hours, we could explore them. But I would be happy just to leave them hanging for our continuous conversation, unless someone on the panel really feels they want to answer or respond to something. It's a little bit unsatisfactory, I know. The questions are excellent, and that's important. But Joe, are you going to finish with the last question?
If I may.
Please, yes.
So I'm an alum of Marquette University. I'm beginning a postdoc at Georgetown, and James was master of Campion Hall when I was there, so I feel I've known many of you guys for a long time. But I'm curious to know, and maybe this isn't to be discussed now, but to think of the previous Father General, Adolfo Nicolas, drafted a letter on distraction, not just in prayer, but in life. And I wonder to what extent theology, and even the classrooms at our universities, can be places that identify where students become distracted in life, and that becomes sort of the pre-theological ground that we can cultivate as educators so that students can reflect on these questions. So I think of Ryan Duns at Marquette, for example, no technology in the classroom, and he begins just with silence. That's sort of the propedeutic to theological reflection. So that's just my thought.
No, thank you. No, it's a good thought. Thank you. I see that Mike is up at 1. Listen, if I want to clear this room very quickly, I'll start to sing. But I don't. I leave it up to you.
Thank you for your presentations. Before you go, Philip Geister wants to make an announcement about the people here who are from the Kircher Network. He would like to have a meeting here. But thank you very much. You know, there's, again, this afternoon, there are these series of workshops. We just had Pep Maria just gave us an advertisement for one of them. So that's this afternoon. And then tomorrow morning, you are in your regional association group. And then tomorrow afternoon, we're back here for the final plenary. Okay? So, Philip.
Yes, I'm Philip Geister, the president of the Kircher Network, the European and Near East Association. I will not keep you, I promise I will not keep you from going to lunch. Only the Europeans and the Near East delegates, if they please could come up here to the podium for a 5-minute or so brief consultation. Thank you very much.
Hey.